Hello and welcome to Film Ireland Presents. I'm Gemma Creagh, and in a few moments we're delighted to welcome writer Jamie Hannigan to the podcast. He's the screenwriter behind The Damned, which hit cinemas on the 10th of January. So first, let's have a listen back to the trailer.
Late one night, when everyone was in bed, there was a knock at the door.
May the Lord protect you from harmful sea creatures and dangerous pirates.
Go.
Poor bastards.
We're not going to help them.
Helping those men will put all of your lives at risk, and I cannot do that.
Whatever wreckage can float, we'll stay close to them.
There!
I've seen evil trying to get in here.
The dead can't break free if you hammer iron nails into their feet.
What happened on that ship was a terrible tragedy.
He doesn't care. I wouldn't sleep if I were you. A thing like that never stops.
It's never too late to ask for forgiveness for what we did.
It won't stop until it's taken all of us.
Keep it away! Keep it away from me!
We should not be here.
Help me! Help me!
The living are always more dangerous than the dead.
And before we chat with Jamie, I got the chance to speak with The Damned director, Thordur Palsson, as well as the talented star, Odessa Young. Thanks so much. We are delighted to have such strong links to this. I know Post was done in Ireland, and Jamie would have been a big person on the writer Jamie would have been a big person on the Irish film scene. So we're lovely to have such a strong connection to it.
Oh, he's probably one of the most important people of the whole crew, everyone. Jamie Hannigan, a fantastic Irish screenwriter.
She actually wrote for our magazine probably 20 odd years ago.
Ah, brilliant. Oh, he's such a talented guy and a great man. You know, I feel very, very lucky to have been able to collaborate with such a visionary, fantastic man.
So I'd love if you could share a little bit about what the development process was, at what stage, how the treatment manifested, at what stage he came on board, and then in terms of then how casting happened.
Yeah, originally I wrote the original treatment to the story, and if we want to go back, I was living in a seaside village in Iceland where I had the idea. I was snowed in for the winter myself, and I was living around a lot of fishermen. So, and then a lot of Icelanders, we know the myth of the Draugur, which is the entity in it. We know a lot of Icelandic history has to do with wrecking and all kinds of things that poor countries sometimes have to do. But yeah, after doing the first treatment with Emily and Camilla, the producers, it was the three of us, and then Jamie read the initial story and thought, I still remember what he said. There's enough there that I can see this could be good, but there's enough missing, so I have something to offer here. And then obviously, as everything develops, it's everything changed. All the contributions, the whole story, everything with that Jamie brought to it, and crafted this script that Odessa in the end read, and thank God she wanted to come on board and go on this crazy journey with us.
And I was wondering if you could share more about your character and how you workshop this with a script like that.
Yeah, my character, her name is Eva. She is the widowed remainder of a man who owned a fishing station, who ran this fishing station. So she has inherited the fishing station, and it's her only way of making any kind of money, any kind of a living. So she kind of is forced into maintaining it and becoming the kind of the proprietor of it. Yeah, she's this young woman who is most likely educated in Copenhagen, and has kind of come back to do this, but she's dealing with a lot of grief and loss kind of when we meet her at the start of the film. And I think she feels a great amount of responsibility to her deceased husband, and also to herself, and also to these fishermen, these people that she has providence over now.
How do you build her? How do you get into the psychology of her and create her so that she's real? Do you base her on people, or do you have techniques that you use?
I think it's so hard to remember, because it kind of becomes like a blackout, being there for so long, and I'm trying to remember kind of what the way in was. I think it starts with a kind of an impression. It starts with this feeling that is very hard to shake, and it's very hard to redefine something once it's kind of got its hooks in you. So the first time I read Eva, I got the impression of a very serious young woman who is trying desperately to maintain a facade of peace and calmness and levity, because she knows that morale is all that matters in these environments. But there is so much threatening that facade. So it became about that. It became about how that facade is built, how it's maintained, and then how it is slowly and surely chipped away at by the occurrences of the film.
And the physical safety is really important, and something like landscape and that threat. I was wondering if you could both talk to me about what the experience was like shooting something outside in February in Iceland, mostly outside.
Cold. It really was so cold. But the landscape, I really do think, was such a fantastic inspiration for the feeling of the film, which is that you are so small and ill-equipped to handle God's majesty.
And Thor, in terms of prep and in terms of how you create and build this world, was this always the space? And then when you got on set, did everything go to plan?
Yeah, it was always the West Fjords of Iceland. For me, that's the most beautiful place in all of Iceland. You have these huge, big mountains, and some of these fjords are built in a way, it feels like there's mountains in every direction. It feels like you're just stuck there. You're not going to get out of there. And I think that kind of adds to the feeling of what we were trying to get at. But did everything go to plan? No. I mean, we lost the snow. There's loads of things kind of. But I think compared to loads of other projects that are shot in Iceland, I think we were very, very, very lucky. And I think all the things, the weather changing, I think it all fed into the kind of tactileness that we were trying to get with this film, shooting on location and trying to find a reality within this genre piece. Because it is all about the characters and how they feel and how they react to the things that are happening, and putting these poor actors in the elements. I think you can see it in their eyes that they can't feel their legs. I don't think that, I myself lost the sensation in both my big toes. I got the sensation back though, but I was just standing there. These people were running around.
And in terms of rehearsal, is this something that you guys prepare for? Do you have much time to workshop what this will look like on the day?
I mean, to take a step backwards, actually, Odessa came on board so early that she was able to read different drafts as we were working our way in, as we were cutting things down, as we were getting rid of dead weight in the script. And she was able to kind of help us hone in on who this character was and kind of figure out certain things that were maybe leading us astray from what needed to be focused on with the character. So when you're lucky enough to have a collaborator that early on, that I think that's why that's why people are connecting to Eva. It's because of that kind of initial work, and then of course the performance Odessa gave. But I think it is that kind of collaboration early on that I think really fed into what it is.
And actually, Odessa, I'd be very interested to. So if you embody a character and you feel something is true for them, how does that sort of manifest? Is that something you're going through the script and you're like, I would not say that, or is it, say, a gut instinct that is like a long discussion?
It's like this strange dance between gut instinct and then also having to kind of zoom out and try to understand the purpose of this person's position in this story. I think when it happens easily, it's usually because most of it makes perfect sense. You're like, oh, I know exactly what's going on. I know how she gets from here to here. I know why she thinks this. I know why this, and this. And I think for the most part, it's not necessarily saying to Thor or Jamie, oh, this is wrong, she wouldn't say this, but more probably just asking questions like, why does this happen? Why does she say this? Helping me wrap my head around something that I might not understand, and then maybe leading us into a conversation about, what we're each seeking. I think it was a really wonderful opportunity for me to come on so early and to have that time with these guys, because I did, by the time we got to set, I mean, so these scenes are small, you know what I mean? It's like a lot of things are happening in this film, but most of these scenes, except for a couple, are about very, very interpersonal conversations and intimate moments and relationships.
I'm going to say that there's a true, like, an authentic emotional arc, even though the world is so heightened.
Right.
And I think that's why it's so watchable throughout, and you're engaged, because it brings the drama on, and it's not just about the existential threat, it's the politics.
Right. And everybody has their very kind of unique relationships, and politics to me is kind of tapping into something that I appreciated about the story and what I found interesting about it. So I think, just to answer that question in terms of like the development of that character, it was a natural progression.
And it's so beautiful, and it's so great on stage. Thank you so much for chatting with us. It's such a great film.
Thanks, Gemma.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for chatting with us.
No worries. Very glad to be here.
Great to have a former contributor and writer, which is really exciting to see. And someone who's been around the Dublin film scene for a while.
Yes. No longer
in
there.
Dublin.
I've been living in Madrid now for 10 years. But when I was living in Ireland, in and around Dublin, and if you're looking for equipment, community courses that like Dublin film base, RIP film base was the place to go. And I did reviews and articles and interviews and things for Film Ireland, a couple of other publications back then of Mongrel and the Event Guide back in day. It was, as I mentioned before we started rolling, was working in the IFI, the Irish Film Institute, for quite a few years on and off while I was writing, because you need some kind of part-time work to keep you going through the hard times, and also, to be honest, through the good times too. When you're starting out, they're all kind of hard. And here I am, many years later, with some films I've written.
Some impressive films, some
Thank you.
um fascinating films, some very dramatic and punchy films. But I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about your trajectory. So how did you go from the aspiring filmmaker and writer, doing bits on the side and doing shorts to, yeah, like creating something as stunning and impressive as The Damned?
Well, okay. The short version was I was studying journalism. I wanted to get into aiming for Dunlearyans. The points had gone up, and I was like, well, I need to do something, and ended up doing journalism, which was very good for training for writing for deadlines, especially hitting word counts, hitting very specific markers.
It's good for funding applications.
Yeah.
Like especially reviewing and that kind of analysis is great for funding
Mm.
applications. It's a very similar like unfun, uncreative. Like it is creative in
Yeah.
its own way, but like I mean, it's a very kind of logistical style of writing.
Yeah, well, it's getting your head into the writing up notes, writing up treatments. Like that was a big thing when, I mean, the fast forward version, I was from college, I was still making little short films on the side. I was applying for funding for years from even when I was in college and just wasn't getting anywhere. And then I think about 2006 or so, I'd been getting shortlisted more consistently from I think for a couple of years beforehand, and then 2006, there was one I wrote, and a friend of mine, Andrew Keogh, directed, got a film base award.
What was it called?
It was called In This Way,
Okay, yeah.
and that was shot by Kate McCullough actually. And I wrote that. I wrote a short story, and then the I think it was an idea Andy had, and then I wrote the short story anyway. And then later on in the year, I got one for a thing called The Beekeeper's Son, which did reasonably well actually. It got into some bigger festivals, and we got to be able to blow it up. It was she shot in Super 16 and blew it up from Screen Ireland funding, and then that was just sort of a springboard then to get a signatures short film, and then I did off the basis of that I was asked to apply for screenplay funding for to direct, but I was kind of going. I think my energy for directing was kind of flagging at this point. I was still doing some music videos here and there, but mostly was just sort of I want to focus on writing for the time being, which is where I started out as a teenager, thinking I'm gonna be a screenwriter.
And what was it about that? Because I mean, like it's a different energy. You do have sort of more control. Was it just that the act of filming is sort of exhausting or it wasn't as rewarding?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, as I said to when Thor, the director of The Down, was asking questions for a revision, I was like, "Look, fine, man, I'll do it. I don't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to go stand on a freezing beach in Iceland in the middle of winter. So, like, I don't care." So maybe I think it's almost I do love there's parts of directing that I really liked, and I liked especially I think the writing part, the prep, and the um, moments on the shoot. But and the edit, of course, I loved. But I think it's when things start spiraling out of your control. I'm probably more adept to it now, to reacting to that, like adjusting to what's changing on the set, and then try. Okay, I'm going to rework the story to fit this. But when I was starting out, I found it very difficult to get away from the thing in my head that I'd written and things that I'd storyboarded and designed and what they would become. And what also I was finding with short films, you end up like plowing a lot of your money into them, especially when you're directing. And I was tired of that.
Putting them into
And
festivals.
yeah, but yeah, festivals and just generally like, oh, someone we need to get a this person needs to get a lift from here to there. It's like I'll put my hand in my pocket, we get a taxi for them, or like we're short at this, and and suddenly like that's when you're directing because it's all going to be from you. You're going to get all the blame, but you're also going to get the kudos if things go well. That said, I mean, I think that it's gotten a little better, but I think screenwriters tend to usually get the blame if things are going badly wrong, and the directors get all the acclaim, which is a running joke I've had with the directors I've worked with. It's like, don't worry about it, I'll get the blame.
But I will say this though, and I do know, like, you're at a level, obviously you create your creative relationships very, like, you curate them in a very careful way, and that's why your work is produced to such a high standard. But you do succeed like an awful lot of control when you're the writer. Do you know, like, decisions can be made that can change the core of your piece without, like, and you can't do a lot about it. But I mean, I
Yeah.
presume it hasn't, because you're working with talents that understand your vision, that trust your vision. But, like, I don't know, that is also a fear.
I mean, I usually say early on that I'm not precious because I know how I've gone through it as directing, editing, even producing. I know how tricky it is to get something across the line. I know how tricky as well in getting funding together, like in early stages, how, you're writing drafts specific, like we need to get this funded, and this is the draft that's going to be for funders. This is the draft for financiers. This is the draft for actors, like a specific, you're trying to get a specific actor is sort of hemming and hawing but you need that person in order to secure a certain amount of funding. So you do a draft which is sort of heavily focused on that character and like giving them a very specific arc that may not end up in the finished draft and the shooting draft, but you kind of need to be on board to do that sort of how should I put it? Sort of maintenance work along the way of the script. You're building the house, but at the same time, you're kind of making little alterations to try and actually get the thing up. I don't, yeah, as like I said, I'm not hugely precious, but I'll try to hold on to the core of what the story is about. With Pilgrimage, the director Brendan Muldowney had said early on he was quite happy with where, even though we made fair few compromises because we were doing something like a 15-20 million dollar film for a quarter of that, for like the catering budget of Game of Thrones is what I used to joke about it. And there were things in that draft, like one of the very first scenes I'd written, I remember was this very evocative thing where they're trying to get this cart with a horse up a hill, and it's muddy and it's heavy rain and thunderstorms, and the cart gets stuck in the mud, and there's lightning and thunder flashing, and it worked lovely on the page. And I think in the first pre-production meeting, Brendan was like, I love how this is written, but we can't shoot this. I'm not doing mud. Costume is going to have a heart attack because anytime the actors fall down the mud, you're going to have a change of costume. And that's going to set us back. Like, we're just going to be to shoot this 2 pages on screen. The way it's written now with the mud and the thunderstorm, as nice as it is going to take us a week. And that's been true. That was true for several times in Pilgrimage. That was true on a lot of stuff in The Damned as well, like the end, the sort of finale, without going into spoilers, but that was initially written as a close to a 5 to 6 page wordless kind of scene. And then I think I got a call. I was only on set of The Damned for Pilgrimage as well for like about a few days of pre-production, the first few days of shooting. With Pilgrimage, I was back for the last week of shooting, I think. But with the Damned, I was writing a TV show episode for a thing called The Woman in the Wall over Christmas, and they started shooting my block at the beginning of the 10th of January, and less than a month later we were shooting The Damned. So I had to sort of finish up work on One on the Wall and then immediately go into the last few drafts of trying to finessing The Damned. But yeah, there was lots of scenes where just through weather as well, because we were shooting, the Damned was shooting in Iceland in February, March. I think we stretched on into April in the end, like the first day or two of April, but it was still like
So was it dark all the time?
well, it's not as dark as it is now, but it is
Yeah.
pretty dark. Like we'd, years earlier, we'd gone on a research location recce, just myself, the director, Thor, and the two producers, Emily and Camilla. And we just went on a little road trip, driving from Reykjavik up to the West Fjords in, I think, late January or something, mid to late January, something like that. And that was like, it doesn't really start getting light until about 10 o'clock. And then it starts getting dark again around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we were trying to maximize driving. But where was I going to with that? I got sidetracked.
I'm
Sorry.
just saying, does that impact your shooting times because it's so far from the equator and like that you're like in summer it's bright for so long and in winter it's like February presumably
Yeah.
gets dark.
Well, yes. I mean, it does, but the film was set at midwinter. Like it's darker now. This is the really dark time in Iceland. I was talking to Thor a few days ago, and it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning here. And it was like, yeah, 9, 10 o'clock there, and it was just pitch black. And he was talking, and as I was talking to him, I could see the sun coming up behind him, but it was very slow. And that's midwinter is when the film was set. So I'd learned also something from Pilgrimage, which was there are no interior scenes in Pilgrimage. The whole film is all of its exteriors. There's one mocked up interior inside a beehive hut at church, and that was basically done with like a fake wall and then boards up. You're kind of shooting Tom Holland, and in the background there's like a door frame, and you can see the sky coming over a hill. But that wasn't shot inside. We couldn't fit all these monks in build a church to shoot inside it. But there was no interiors, and that left us with no leeway. Like if the weather goes really badly, you ideally want to go shoot to an interior. So with The Damned, I had that in my head going, right, we're going to be shooting in the West Fjords in February. So I need to have a lot of interior scenes. So what we did was that most of the action is sort of set in this fishing hut sort of little house. And we built the production designers built. I didn't know to do it. But they built on the inside in this town, Isafjordur, an old fishing factory. And they basically could use 2 floors so that it looks like there's a stairs going up and there's a stairs at the top. So they had 2 levels, 2 sets, the bedroom sets and then the sort of the ground floor set. And the exteriors was something we saw on that recce trip years earlier, which was this fishing museum, which was these old fishing huts that they maintain and they use them and they give guides around and at the time, like that was a really terrific. That research trip was terrific because not in terms of just seeing what the landscape is going to be like at that time of year, but going to these museums and seeing the actual equipment and like where these people will be living. You're like, Jesus, this is hard and cold and drafty.
A trip like that where you get to physically inhabit sort of mentally a little bit more the space that your characters will. Would that impact your next draft at all, or would
Oh yeah.
would things be set in stone?
No, I mean the drafts are constantly shifting. Like that trip, how the film had developed was that Thor and Emily and Camilla they had this idea, this treatment, very rough treatment that they'd been working at the Nordic Noir, some film thing, and one of the people on the panel when they were pitching this idea was the exec. Todd Brown was one of the execs on Pilgrimage, and they were looking for a writer, and he recommended me, and blah 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 blah. Anyway, a year or so later, we were driving up, and the concept was the same: isolated fishing community, shipwrecked offshore, and the dilemma of what you do because you're cut off for the winter and you don't have much food. And I'd say that was the thing that hooked me on the concept, and that was probably the only thing that stayed intact from that initial concept. Like after that, I kind of, there was a lot of new stuff brought in over the years of development. But that trip opened up a lot of avenues, especially for the main character. There was a museum we were at, and the guy running it I was asking questions about like who runs these fishing stations, and he'd said, oh well, it's the skipper is usually the boat owner, and he's like a position of power, but like it was like what happens if he dies, and he's like, oh well, then it goes to the wife, but the wife is expected to remarry within 6 months and have someone else take it. So that I thought that was very interesting. And then seeing the fishing station itself and just like where people just step out of was very helpful, just in terms of imagining how far they have to go down, like the types of rollers and the take of these boats, the size of the boats and how difficult they are to manage, and equipment. There was a terrific mockumentary really. We came a hold of on one of these trips. It was a film made, a 30 minute film shot back in, I think, late 80s. And it's got a voiceover that it's a day in the life of these fishermen at the same period that we were doing our thing. And so that was, and it's not really a dramatic arc. It's just like, this is the skipper, these are his men, this is what they do in the morning, this is when they get up, and this just goes through their day. And that sort of thing is immensely valuable. Like sort of just day-to-day living is a sort of research stuff that I'm always looking to hoover up. And it depends how easy. The further you go back, that gets more and more difficult. Like with Pilgrimage was 13th century, so that was just, and in Ireland, and there wasn't very few written records. Most Irish tradition before then was oral. So you need to adjust to make certain liberties to kind of try and get an idea of what that world would be like. With Iceland in the 19th century, it was a little easier. Obviously, I had no access to the original sources, but I'd find enough decent translations and then try to extrapolate from them what the life would be like, and then try to find a dramatic situation in that people can kind of relate to.
Yeah. And that's it. I think one of the things is the humanity of the characters and how authentic it's played, that it is a difficult situation that's very clearly set up, and like the motivations of all these kind of conflicting, but like I almost warmly drawn, like even though they are in like a really harsh space, you're really kind of on side with it. And yeah, I don't want to go too much into the plot. So in terms of research, is your process different for every single type of project? So I mean, one of your other ones was sort of high concept in that it was dealing with like a dislodged consciousness, and then you have things set in the past. I'm like, when it comes to like what attracts you to idea in the first place, is it something that you're like, okay, I have to just have that hook there, or is it something that you find as you go?
That's a good question. I mean, that specifically the consciousness one you're talking about was a signature short. And I think I wrote that as a short story. That was a stream of consciousness short story. And then it was very ambitious. And there were things I think approaching it, I probably would have adapted my own short story slightly differently if I was doing it again. But with the historical stuff, usually there's some kind of a hook. Like the thing with The Damned was that initial hook of like this dilemma of what do you do? You're faced with, and that idea of a community who doesn't have a lot, and they're faced with someone in need. So we can help them, but we may hurt ourselves in the process. And that was that's always going to be a very topical situation. At the time, the initial Syrian refugee crisis was it had been going on for a couple of years, but it only reached the UK where I was meeting all the producers and director at the time. It was only kind of like reaching the public consciousness there. So that was kind of like ringing around. And Brexit was another thing. The fear of the foreigner. But it depends with what you want to do. With Pilgrimage, I always wanted to do a kind of Yojimbo type film, but set in Ireland. I'd always felt that Ireland had this great history that was just right, had so much stuff, little interesting stuff in it, but also it wasn't completely cataloged in the same way that like the Roman Empire is like really well cataloged. You knew a fair bit about Ireland, but a lot of it you were drawing in your own imagination, and then my own preoccupations with kind of faith and uh, theology and theocracy was kind of going to that. With the Damned was much more the moral choice of like, where do you go? What do you do in the situation, and how does that affect you later on down the road? Like what the road to hell is paved with good intentions and all that. So um, yeah, the project they tend to start with a thing, and I don't really know what the thing is. The things changes from story to story. The Beekeeper's Son short was a conversation with my late uncle who kept bees. Various other scripts come from. Some of them are like I was hired to adapt a Western, and I just hadn't. I like Westerns, and I hadn't done one. And the writer had done so much work in sort of setting the world in the novel that I was like, oh great, this will be, he's already got the vernacular and the research. Of course, I ended up having to do a lot more research because the novel was told in the first person, and you need to kind of expand from that for a film. Uh, Sometimes it's an attraction in a particular era, or uh, like I said, a dilemma that you're kind of interested in exploring. There was a project I signed on to last year, which was it last year or was it this year? I think I signed on to it last year, but I only ended up started working on it this year, which was set in 5th century Ireland. Even though I'd made a promise to myself not to do much period stuff, because it's the work and research is can be um, quite demanding. Like you need to read a lot of stuff that's not necessarily more academic stuff as well. I tend to try to get a very academic baseline, but without just sort of like, say you're doing a film and say a Roman history thing, for example, then you could just watch a bunch of films set in Roman times, but you're getting then a third, second, fourth, fifth, seventh hand source from the original. So your research is trying to as hone as closely into sources from the time. But I'd always, even though I'd said this about doing period stuff after Pilgrimage the Damned, I didn't want to do much more period stuff. This particular setting of 5th century Ireland, just turning over from Christianity, was kind of interesting to me. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And it is so interesting. And I kind of want to talk actually a little bit about the work. So you were saying you have one or two things that you're are in development at the moment, and I know like things can get stuck in development hell. What is it, like 1 in 8 is what makes it out of the gates of things that are actually in funded development? I don't know how. I don't know where that figure is. It's just
That
bandied
sounds
about.
about right. That sounds about right. Yeah, I have a lot of projects in development hell.
Yeah. So tell me, like, is it a case of, okay, so TV is its own thing. That's happening then. If the money is there and if it's in production, like that's happening. But with films, I presume there's so many different pots you have to try and get from that. If one falls, that's a delay of a year, and filming times and stuff. So tell me a little bit about, like, in terms of going on projects and finding the projects that you want to do, is it a case of like, look, you're at your film festivals with this, you're meeting people, you're getting cards? Is it a case of you have an agent and you're like, I want everything to go through them? Like, how do you sort of pick what you want to add to the slate? And then, yeah, is there any stuff that, was kind of stuck on that slate that you never got to take any further that you would love to?
uh, well, the projects that have come from everywhere. There's no. I have an agent, and I've gotten work through her. A lot of it can be just word of mouth. Like, I mean, I found TV is a very feels like a closed shop to me. But then I know TV writers who are saying, "Oh, film is a closed shop. Like, I can't get anything done in film, but I can get TV." And it's just like, yeah, there's a connection there. Producers I've worked with before, people put recommendations out, like say, oh, this particular person might be a good fit for this. I don't know. I suppose the thing I do now is I am more circumspect about what I would do, knowing that it could likely be a better part of 10 years you're working on something. So it has, and the Damned was something where someone had come to me with an idea. Pilgrimage was something that I brought to Conor Barry and Brendan Muldowney. There's other specs where I've got, just an idea and I start working on a treatment, and then the treatment, I might either apply for Screen Ireland funding to get it off the ground. There's a project I did that for the first time in a few years ago for a new spec during the pandemic when everything else dried up. And sometimes it's just sometimes it's the agent came to me with a book. A producer was looking for someone to adapt a book, and I worked on that. Sometimes with a TV thing, been a couple of pilots. Like there's been source material. There's a thing with Wild Atlantic, which is based in a comic book, which is still, I think, swirling around. And I wrote a pilot and a season outline for that. Some of it's spec stuff. Like I just write, like literally when we finish this call, well, not today. I've got something to do after this, but most of this week is trying to do a spec for a TV idea, which I've had a very detailed treatment for. I have a lookbook document I've made up and a season outline. But the market has changed slightly. Like it used to be, if you went in with a strong treatment and an outline, people would be like, "Cool, here's money to go write the first draft." And it is more difficult to do that unless you're coming off the back of something quite hot.
Right.
So yeah, and the people are like, "Oh, I had a meeting a few weeks ago where I had a very detailed film treatment for a reasonably commercial idea, and the producers they said, well, look, this is great, but we don't have the money to develop a first draft. So if you can write that and come back to us, then we can start developing it from there." So that it's strange that when I started out, I mentioned how I started out in journalism, and that was kind of helpful for writing treatments and things. And around that time, Screen Ireland had changed their specifications for applying for screenplay funding to applying with just treatments. And this was a skill that was new. It wasn't something that a lot of writers and producers and directors, I think, had done much of. Or maybe I'm overselling it, like, but it wasn't they were used to writing the screenplays.
And a literary background as well, that you're able to kind of put things in prose in a way that it's interesting to read.
Well, that's the trick. I mean, I'm not saying that all the treatments I'm writing are all gold. Sometimes it's quite perfunctory, but I can usually knock something out. But there was cases where I was getting nixer money because someone had a screenplay that they wanted to submit for funding, but the application asked for a treatment. So I was sort of reverse engineering. I was taking this almost completed screenplay and writing a treatment based on that, and they were submitting that to get money for a screenplay that I'd already written. This is like 10, 12, 13 years ago now. But yeah, there was a very brief period where I was getting approached by producers or writer directors saying, "We need someone can you boil this down into a treatment?" And I was like, "Grand." And so, nix our money. And
I think that's a good learning experience as well, where you actually get to figure out the structure. You get to kind of see where all the character arcs are working, like things like that. It's that thing where it's even when you're doing work that's sort of adjacent, but it isn't necessarily the thing that you immediately want to do. There's still learning to be had in beats like that.
Absolutely.
What would you define as your voice? And then is there anything in like in that you'd be like, okay, this is my wheelhouse, this is my voice, this is what I can do with my hands, like tied behind my back, and that I know. And then what would be the thing that you'd like to do that maybe would be outside of that, if there is anything, or are you very much so, no, this is my area?
Um, I
See, it's a weird question.
no, no, it's actually it's a question the producer asked me. I've been asked like 3 or 4 times that this year in various meetings, and I generally say, look, I can do kind of usually dark genre stuff, anything with action. I can tie the action into some kind of emotional beat. I think I can do pretty easily. I won't say one hand tied behind my back because then it'll take me twice as long to type. But what I'd probably like doing is maybe even more family stuff. That sounds a bit silly because I don't know. There's an old adage that you don't really know what kind of a writer you are until you've written a lot of stuff, and then you start seeing themes evolve. I don't know what that would be for me. I remember once there was some exec in was it Film 4 at the time, and sort of was, oh well, you write about like manly men in difficult situations. I was like, no, I don't. What a strange thing to say. But maybe that was the one thing. He'd read 2 scripts and they both happened to maybe feature men in them doing manly stuff. And so he thought that
I
was,
also think people read scripts where they're at, where, and maybe they're like, I don't know what on paper looked like, but I thought in The Damned it was quite nuanced, and like there was kind of like those deep, thoughtful undercurrents that pushed all the action forward. So I was like, maybe people just read things where they're at, and they
yeah,
just get that level that they don't see it if it's not
I don't,
explicitly said in this moment, this person is thinking of this thing, where, like if you get the subtext of it, you get it. But if you don't, maybe you don't.
yeah. I mean, I don't, I'm not sure. I mean, I say the children's thing because there's been a couple of novels that would have skewed younger than like I have 2 small kids now, and so maybe I'm thinking like what could they like they can't watch any of my movies, but something that they could watch in the next few years. And there were novels that I was like going things that I loved as a child and loved as a teenager, and I was like, man, I've been thinking of ways to adapt this. Like I also what I think I'm reasonably good at, although some will argue is treating scripts almost like uh, jigsaw puzzles or crosswords, like where it's a puzzle that I need to kind of like undo and then I can put back again. And when you're adapting from a novel, it's a case of like taking something apart, putting it back together again so it still works, but it's not going to be the same as the original. And I think I have a certain aptitude for that. But the trouble is when I might put my name forwards for these things, I'm generally told, no, your stuff is too dark, it's too adult, it's too violent. I'm like, because that was the project I was doing. They were dark and violent. It's not like I'm leaning towards darkness and violence every time.
All the best kids stuff that we would have watched growing up was sort of dark.
Yes.
This is the thing where, like, the world is sort of a scary place, and it's a safe way to process that. So I think, like that darkness, like look at like all those, kids movies in like the 80s where, like people are really murdered, and
Yeah.
like threat is really serious, and the worlds are really strange and kind of uncomfortable. And I'm like, I don't know. They're the ones that really resonate with you, rather than, like someone who just goes to a high school and doesn't fit in, and then they fit in and then everything's fine. It was like, you're not going to even remember
You
that.
just listed my all-time favorite hate movie. I can't watch anything revolving around a teenager in a high school, especially like coming of age. And like, oh, really? I don't know. It's just that is my I can't I don't know how to do that. That sort of is that self reflection, for want of a better word, because I think you need to dig down into yourself to kind of get a very specific story. And I don't know if I'm ready to do that myself. But also, I just find it's like musical biopics. I find them almost all jukebox tedious. Like I hum along. It's like, oh, this is the tune. I kind of like this, but they're all. It's like once you've seen that film, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. You can't, or Pop Star, Never Stop Stopping. Like those two films are basically they're terrific. They're very, very funny, and I rewatch them as often as I can. But they kind of deconstruct what the musical biopic is. Now that said, I've heard that the new Bob Dylan one is very good, but I'm going to reserve judgment until I see it. Uh, but yeah, does it that answer the weird question slightly, or
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. That's good. Well, at least see it's signed on now for like, a two-parter of a coming of age teen girl.
You'll know I really need the money if I sign on to do a coming of age movie like that. I really need the money, but no one's going to hire me for that, so it's a moot point.
But that's very interesting. And again, I think The Damned is just such a it must be very satisfying to see something, when you're kind of like sitting on it for that amount of space to see it get across the line and on the big screen. What do you hope people will take from it when they watch it?
Um, what do I hope? I don't know. It's a spooky little Christmas movie, I suppose. It is set at Christmas. I know it's not really hugely Christmassy, but it's got that isolated vibe. Like there was the we were when I started out, I was kind of listing the films that I was trying to go for, which is more The Thing, Alien.
I
Um,
totally thought of The Thing as well. I was like,
it's difficult to do any kind of genre story isolated in the snow with like people in a close environment kind of at each other's throats without evoking that film. But yeah, an Alien as well, because it's a very tight-knit uh group who are sort of like just faced with something, one bad decision, and it sort of leads to a world of hurt. Um
and the eels are very interesting.
do you like those? Yeah.
Like there's such a mysterious creature because no one knows how they're born. Like I think that's the strangest thing. Like they haven't got their life cycle tracked. So they're actually sort of a strange, like, of all the creatures, like, and they exist in land. Like where do they go? How do they reproduce?
Well, yeah, I must confess to a certain amount of creative license with that particular scene with the eels that you're talking about. Yeah, it's a wintry movie. It's a wintry, chilly movie with some spooky stuff. I think I was probably more aiming for, with the writing, it was more ghost story eeriness than monster movie fright, but it kind of has a little bit of all of those things in it. Um, but I kind of like the moral, like I said, the moral dilemma is kind of what pushes the thing forwards. Like, what do you do when you're faced with that kind of situation? So yeah, it'd be nice if, although I don't know if are people really, do they want to go to the cinema to have moral questions thrown at them? I guess they do.
Well, I think in January everyone's going to be sober. They're going to want to watch something good in that looks good on a big screen, and like that, Iceland has never not looked good on a
Yeah,
big screen.
yeah,
The
and
production is beautiful. The performances are incredible. It's tense the whole way through, and it doesn't, like, even though it is dark, it doesn't have that, like, it doesn't have like that horrible weight. It doesn't say like, and it does make that quandary. It doesn't make such a kind of sweeping, grotesque statement about the state of humanity that you're like left depressed either. Like like it's contained and the characters are enjoyable to watch, um and even though, like, like, there's conflicted and there's things that I don't know how to say without saying anything, but like, like, that's there. I think it's just really strong,
thank
and
you.
something that, again, it's so atmospheric and perfect for the big screen, especially when you're not drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, there's that. No, it's very difficult to get Iceland not looking good. And we're sort of helped with the cinematographer, Eli, who he shot Lamb, that Naomi Rapace movie from a few years ago, A24 did.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh, I still think about that. That's one of the ones that will unsettle you. I still think about that film sometimes. It pops into my head
yeah,
where I feel really uncomfortable.
yeah, it's actually I found it quite I only had watched it like in the prep before I met him. I was like I should watch this movie, and it was good because then when we were coming up with creative solutions for changing things in the first week, and we're like the weather had changed quite dramatically, and it was like you were getting a lot of snow, and then the snow would melt very quickly. So you were kind of having to shift. Like, we got to shoot all the inside stuff, and now the snow's back. We got to go shoot the exterior stuff, and but there was a lot of sequences. There was a key sequence with mist that it's not the mist sequence that's in the film. It was something that was written for the coast for a fishing scene, and he he had this very clear idea of how he was going to pull it off. But then the trouble was mist doesn't work well on the water because it blows away. Anyway, but no, the stuff him and Thor had come up with this rule of shooting where everything has to be from either Odessa's character is going to be in it or you're seeing it from her point of view. And so I had to tweak sort of a lot of scenes about a month or, well, 2 months beforehand to accommodate this. But I think it all works on screen, and there's yeah, it is a beautiful, beautiful movie. And I think in an age when you have so many films are kind of reduced to content and they have a certain flat digital look. This, I'm very, very proud at how lush and kind of deep looking it is. There's a sense of focus, there's a sense of place, there's use of foreground and background and negative, positive shadows and whatnot, and solid blacks that I think works very well. Natural lighting as well. I think it looks. I think Thor and Eli did a fantastic job at that, and Odessa and the rest of the cast brought so much to those characters to bring them to life that it was. I sort of after the first week on set, I kind of left it feeling like, right, we're in safe hands here. Like I think the film is going to end up okay, which it did.
And it does. It did. It's brilliant. Oh, but thank you so much for chatting with us.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, everyone go see it.
Please do. Please do. Cinemas on January 10th, I think. Yeah. All right.
Which is today.
Yes. Which is today. We're not recording this much earlier. Definitely not.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And thank you so much for listening. Make sure to check out our website now on filmireland.ie.